Under the sterile fluorescent lights of Dr. Simon's office, Claire sat frozen, her fingers twisting the fabric of her pale blue skirt like a lifeline. The room was warm, too warm, almost suffocating. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, soft and golden, as if mocking the moment with its serenity. There was nothing serene about what she was about to hear. You could tell something was off by the way the doctor cleared his throat twice. That tiny gesture, insignificant on any other day, cracked open a silence that would change her life forever. "I'm very sorry, Claire," Dr. Simon began, his voice steady but unusually gentle. "The results are conclusive." That word conclusive felt like a gunshot. Final, no room for maybes. No room for hope. He didn't stop there. "It appears the difficulty in conceiving is due to your reproductive health. Specifically, diminished ovarian reserve and endometrial thinning." "I wish I had better news." Claire didn't speak. She couldn't. Her breath caught somewhere between her ribs and her throat, trapped like a scream underwater. Andrew, sitting beside her, didn't reach for her hand. He didn't flinch, he simply nodded, as if he'd already known, as if this was confirmation of a private theory he'd long suspected. She didn't look at him, she was afraid to see judgment. Afraid to find disappointment carved into his features. Andrew wasn't cruel, not in the way people scream or throw things. No, he was worse, he was silent, and sometimes, silence slices deeper than words ever could. As the doctor continued, offering hollow words about IVF, hormone therapy, and success rates that sounded more like baits at a losing table, Claire felt her world shift. Not collapse, shift, tilt, ever so slightly, but enough to make everything familiar suddenly feel wrong. The office, once a space of hope, felt like a trap. Her body, once a mystery she trusted, now felt like a betrayal. By the time they reached the car, neither of them had spoken. Claire's voice had deserted her, and Andrew, well, he seemed to have nothing to say. The drive was quiet, the kind of quiet that screamed. The kind of quiet that filled every inch of the car like thick smoke. Claire stared out the window, trying to remember when this had all started to fall apart. Was it the test results, or had the decay begun long before that? When they got home, Claire wanted to speak desperately, but what do you say when your heart is shattered, and the person who should be your shelter becomes another closed door? She used to believe their love was different, that what they had could survive anything. Before Andrew, she had buried herself in work, trying to prove that she was more than her father's legacy. As the sole heir to Thompson Publishing in Boston, Claire had been molded from childhood to lead. And she did, with grace and power. She commanded boardrooms, led acquisitions, built a name. But in all that success, there was still an ache for something simpler, something that looked a lot like love. She met Andrew in a coffee shop, the kind of cliché meet-cute people write about in books. He was charming, persistent, and patient. He didn't mind taking things slow. He wanted her for who she was, or so she thought. They married after 2 years of dating, and for a while, it was beautiful. But slowly, so slowly she couldn't even name when things had shifted. The warmth cooled, the silences lengthened. The intimacy thinned, maybe the honeymoon phase just wore off. Or maybe, Claire thought bitterly, she had simply refused to see what was always there. What followed the diagnosis was not comfort, it was avoidance. Andrew buried himself in work, disappearing behind closed doors and glowing screens. When he was home, he was distant. When he wasn't, he was unreachable. And Claire, left alone in a house that once felt like theirs, began to spiral. Then came the idea, the cruise, a romantic getaway, just the two of them. A chance to reset, to breathe, to find their way back. She booked it as a surprise. But when she told Andrew, instead of joy, she saw irritation flash across his face. "You booked a cruise without asking me. I thought it would be romantic." "Well, it's done now. I guess we're going." He didn't even pretend to be excited. Claire tried to brush it off. She told herself it was the stress, the disappointment, the hormones. Anything but what her gut already knew, that something in him had changed. Or worse, that something in him had always been missing. But nothing could have prepared her for what she overheard the night before the trip. She had gone out to the garage to grab the last of the groceries when she heard whispering near the side gate. It was his parents, Paige and Philip, and Andrew was with them. "She's a waste of time," Paige hissed. "I thought marrying into a wealthy family would elevate us." "But she can't even give you a child," Philip's voice was cold. "If you stay married to her, you'll lose everything. You need someone younger, someone fertile." Then came Andrew's voice, flat, calculated. "I already have someone else. Her name's Emily. She can't wait to start a family with me." Claire froze, the words wrapped around her neck like a noose. "Then divorce her," his mother snapped. "No," Andrew growled, "she'd take everything." "But this cruise... it's perfect. Accidents happen at sea." Claire didn't remember how she got back into the house. Didn't remember turning off the stove or texting Andrew that something had come up at work. But she left, drove for hours, her phone buzzing with texts she didn't read. Her heart pounding with a terror that she didn't know how to contain. Andrew didn't want a divorce, he wanted her dead. Because in death, she couldn't fight back. In death, she couldn't protect what was hers. In death, he got everything, but Claire wasn't dead, not yet. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as powerless as they all thought. If this story has gripped your heart like it did mine, if you want to know how Claire's journey unfolds, how she fights back, how she rises, then I invite you to subscribe to the channel. It's your support that fuels stories like this. Stories of betrayal, resilience, and the power of reclaiming your life. Now, before you go, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If you discovered your partner was plotting to hurt you for financial gain, what would you do? A. Run immediately without confrontation. Protect yourself first. B. Confront them directly to expose the betrayal. Comment your answer below. Or B. Let's talk about it. The first thing Claire Thompson did when she got back to her office that Monday morning wasn't to check her email or take a call. It was to close her door, pull down the blinds, and sit at her desk in silence. Her breathing was shallow, controlled, but inside, she was a volcano on the brink. That one overheard conversation outside the garage had undone everything. Not just her marriage, but her sense of safety, her trust in love, her belief that she would grow old next to the man she once called her best friend. She wasn't just betrayed, she was hunted. And in that terrifying clarity, Claire realized she had no time to fall apart. She had to become the version of herself that had built an entire publishing empire in one of the most cutthroat cities in America. Ruthless, strategic, precise. Her father used to tell her, "When you're cornered, don't panic, pivot." So that's exactly what she did. By the end of that day, Claire had transferred all non-joint assets out of Andrew's reach. Every real estate property, side investment, private accounts, everything her prenup allowed her to reclaim was now back under her name alone. She moved like a woman possessed, but with the restraint of a CEO, every document filed, every loophole closed, every threat anticipated. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. That would come later, maybe, but not now. The next step was Rachel Green, her attorney and longtime friend. Rachel had always warned her about Andrew. Not with loud objections, but with the kind of subtle wariness only people with good instincts carry. Claire walked into Rachel's office unannounced, dropped the signed divorce papers on her desk, and said, "I want out quietly, thoroughly, and fast." Rachel blinked. "Claire, is it what I think it is?" Claire didn't say yes, she didn't need to. "Then we'll burn this thing to the ground," Rachel replied, already pulling files from a cabinet. Claire didn't go home that night. She couldn't. The idea of sleeping under the same roof as the man who might have pushed her overboard for a payout chilled her to the bone. She checked into a hotel under a different name and used a secondary phone number to communicate with her assistant, Melissa, back at the company. She told Melissa she was going away indefinitely. The company would be in her hands now. Claire wasn't walking away entirely. She would still be reachable by email or phone, but Melissa was to oversee day-to-day operations. The news stunned her. "Are you okay?" she asked, eyes wide. Claire offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I will be." The next few days were a storm of planning, logistics, exit routes. She made a list of every person she trusted, and it was painfully short. But that made it easier, fewer people to involve, fewer stories to fabricate. She wasn't just leaving Andrew, she was disappearing. Claire had one goal: vanish before he realized what she knew. The house she found was a forgotten farm tucked away in Vermont, 2 hours from Boston, surrounded by acres of woodland, and just remote enough to be invisible. It had been listed for years, falling into disrepair, but Claire saw in it what she saw in herself, a wreck that could still be rebuilt. She paid in full, no mortgage, no financial trace linking it back to her primary accounts. Just a woman looking for quiet. That's what she told the realtor. She hired a construction crew to begin the first phase of restoration, plumbing, roofing, heating, just enough to make it livable for now. She would finish the rest later, room by room. Claire needed a place where no one could find her, but also a place that could hold her broken pieces while she tried to put herself back together. The last thing she did before leaving Boston was record a video. She sat in a private room, her phone propped on a stand, her hair pulled back neatly, her expression cold. Andrew Page Phillip, if you're watching this, then you already know I'm gone. Don't bother looking for me, I filed for divorce. The properties you thought were yours aren't. I've reclaimed what's mine. You can keep the house. It's full of too many lies anyway. I know about Emily. And I know about your little cruise idea, and if you think I'm going to sit still and let you take everything my father built, you've underestimated me more than I thought. Goodbye. One take, she didn't blink. When she finally left the city, it wasn't with fear. It was with a strange kind of peace, not hope, not yet, but the space in which hope could someday grow. She drove herself the entire way to the farm, not stopping, not thinking, just driving. The property was exactly as the photos had shown, overgrown, lonely, barely standing, but to Claire, it looked like sanctuary. She didn't need luxury, she needed silence, she needed time. She needed distance from everything that had once been her life. Her bodyguard team was already in place, stationed discreetly in an unmarked SUV down the road, just in case. Claire had no proof Andrew was still a threat, but she didn't need proof. She had instincts, and instincts were what had kept her alive in business, and now, maybe in life. The first night at the farmhouse, Claire sat on the dusty wooden floor with a blanket and a thermos of tea. There were no beds yet, no curtains, no warmth. Just her and the wind moving through broken windows. She listened to it for a long time, eyes open in the dark. She wasn't free yet, not completely. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't being watched, she wasn't being judged. And she wasn't being haunted, she had escaped. And now, she would begin again, on her own terms. Reflective question for the audience. If you discovered someone close to you planned to harm you but you had no proof, what would you do? A. Leave silently and cut off all contact to protect yourself. B. Stay close and gather evidence to expose them. Tell us your answer in the comments below. Or B. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel so we can keep bringing you powerful stories just like this one. Your support means everything. The farmhouse didn't come with instructions on how to heal. No one left a manual by the dusty windows or scribbled secrets on the cracked walls. Claire Thompson stepped into that house with nothing but pain stitched into her ribs and silence weighing in her chest. And yet, that silence was the first thing she came to treasure. It didn't expect anything of her. It didn't ask her to smile, it didn't demand answers. It simply existed, like she did. There were days she didn't speak to another soul. She woke with the sun, worked with her hands, and collapsed each night onto a mattress on the floor, surrounded by unfinished walls and the scent of sawdust. The rebuilding of the farmhouse gave her something that therapy or revenge or running never had. It gave her rhythm, purpose, something outside of grief. It wasn't that she had forgotten Andrew, she hadn't. It was that she no longer wanted to remember him with emotion. She didn't need rage to keep going, she needed peace. And slowly, the land began to give her that. The work was hard, but Claire had always thrived under pressure, fixing fences, painting doors, cleaning out what once was a barn and could one day be something more. She was covered in bruises and dirt most days, but in those scars, she found something sacred. She was taking back control, one broken board at a time. She kept herself isolated by design, no visits, no social media, no updates. Only Rachel, her attorney, knew where she was. Claire's only link to the outside world was through work emails she checked occasionally, and Melissa, her second-in-command, who sent her weekly updates. The company was doing fine, in some ways, better. That truth stung a little, but it also freed her. The world didn't end because she stepped back. That meant she could choose when or if she stepped forward again, and then there was Luke. He wasn't supposed to be anything more than a name on a receipt. The driver from the city, contracted through a car service, polite and efficient. She remembered him vaguely from a few executive rides, but out here, in the quiet of Vermont, he was something else entirely. He showed up with a tool belt slung around his waist and kindness in his eyes. Claire had ordered plumbing supplies. The local plumber didn't show, Luke did. "I live 10 minutes from here," he explained with a soft smile, figured I'd lend a hand. She should have refused, she usually did. But something about the steadiness in his voice, the lack of agenda, made her pause. She let him in, he fixed the pipes, she made him dinner. It was that simple. Over the weeks that followed, Luke became a quiet presence in her life, not invasive, not overly curious. Just there when she needed help, disappearing when she didn't. He never asked about her past. He didn't flinch at the tension she still carried in her shoulders or the occasional vacant look that came when memories hit too hard. He never pressed. Claire brought food when he helped a pie, some stew, once a batch of cookies that made his grandmother, Helen, laugh out loud from the kitchen. "If you don't marry this one, Luke, you're a fool," the old woman had said, eyes twinkling. Claire blushed, not because she was in love yet, but because for the first time in years, she felt seen in a way that wasn't transactional. Luke had his own scars, that much was clear. He spoke little about his time in the military, even less about the injury that forced him out. But he smiled when he mentioned Helen. His love for her was written in every act of care, every gentle rebuke when she tried to do too much. He didn't complain about the life he had, he just lived it. The day Claire invited Helen to visit the farm was unplanned. Luke had an emergency in town and asked if she could watch over his grandmother. Claire said yes before thinking, and it was only later, driving the old woman across winding roads, that she questioned if she had overstepped. But Helen's joy upon seeing the farmhouse erased all doubt. "I remember when this place had horses," she said, stepping onto the porch. "I'm glad someone's bringing it back to life." They sat in the sun, drinking lemonade, talking about nothing and everything. And somewhere between stories of Helen's youth and Claire's plans for the property, something shifted. Claire felt it, something opening. Not a door, not yet, but a window, a little light seeping in. When Luke returned and learned of the visit, he didn't scold. He didn't panic, he smiled, deeply, gratefully. "You have no idea how much that meant to her," he said. Claire looked at him, then really looked and realized that she trusted him. Not just with errands or tools, but with herself, and that was terrifying. Because love, for her, had become synonymous with danger, with deception, with almost dying, and now, here was this man, quietly making her feel again. She didn't rush into anything, didn't make grand declarations. But one evening, as they stood on the porch after another long day, she turned to him and said, "I care about you. More than I expected. I don't know what this is yet, but I want to find out slowly, carefully." Luke didn't laugh, he didn't hesitate. He simply nodded, reached for her hand, and said, "We'll figure it out together." And in that moment, Claire knew she had crossed some invisible line between surviving and living, between escaping and healing. She wasn't all better, she wasn't whole. But she was no longer afraid of the pieces. The past still haunted her in flashes, in the quiet between breaths, in the creak of the old floorboards, but the present was stronger now, louder, warmer. And maybe, just maybe, the future could be hers again. Reflection question for you. When someone new enters your life after deep betrayal, how do you move forward? A. Keep your distance and wait until you're fully healed. B. Let them in slowly, even if you're still mending. Share your answer below, or B, and let's talk about it. And if this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this one to life. Miracles never arrive on schedule. They do not knock politely or announce themselves with fanfare. They show up in the quiet, when no one is watching, when the heart has long since stopped expecting anything good, and yet, somehow, still chooses to keep beating. Claire had stopped praying, not out of anger, not even sadness, just fatigue. After everything, the betrayal, the escape, the long road back to herself, she had learned not to expect joy, only to welcome it cautiously when it came. So when her doctor called that cold November morning, asking her to come in as soon as possible, Claire assumed something was wrong. She hadn't even remembered missing her period. Her days had become a gentle routine: wake with the chickens, work in the garden, laugh with Helen, and sometimes fall asleep on the couch with Luke's hand resting over hers. The body kept pace with the soul, quiet and steady. So, the idea of being pregnant after years of being told it was impossible didn't even occur to her. She sat in that sterile exam room, arms crossed, heart calm but curious, until the doctor entered with the look that all women come to recognize. That one expression, not bad news, not even exactly good news, just something so unexpected that language falters before it. "You're 8 weeks along," he said, and then paused, perhaps waiting for a scream or gasp or something louder than Claire's silence. She stared at him, blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" He showed her the ultrasound, the gentle flutter of a heartbeat, like a firefly in water. "You're pregnant, naturally. No interventions. And the baby is growing well." Claire didn't cry, not at first. Her brain refused to compute. She nodded, thanked him, walked back to her car like someone leaving a funeral in reverse, staggered by life instead of death. She didn't tell Luke that night or the next. She needed time. Space to sit with this miracle that didn't ask permission to arrive. She walked the farm, hand pressed lightly to her belly, wondering how something could live there inside the very place doctors had once called barren. When she finally told him, it wasn't some dramatic scene. They were planting saplings on the far edge of the field, and she simply said, "I have to tell you something. I'm pregnant." Luke dropped the shovel. For a long beat, he said nothing. His face shifted not with shock or confusion but awe. He moved to her side slowly, as if afraid one sudden motion might wake him from a dream. "How?" he asked, softly. "I don't know," Claire whispered. "They said it couldn't happen, it just did." Then his arms were around her, not tight, not claiming, but reverent, like he was holding a blessing, not a woman. That night, they sat on the porch in silence, letting the stars say what words couldn't. Claire had never believed in fate. But she believed in beginnings, and this was a beginning she had never dared to imagine. The months that followed were not all magic. Morning sickness hit her like a truck. Helen worried constantly. The baby kicked so hard at night that Claire sometimes cried from exhaustion. But under all the discomfort was something sacred, a knowing that the universe hadn't forgotten her. Luke built a crib by hand. Claire painted the nursery a soft grey. They read baby books out loud, took turns guessing if it was a boy or girl, and fought over names in the gentle way only people deeply in love can afford to. And yet, as her belly grew, so did her fear, not of motherhood, but of the past. Would Andrew find her? Would he try to ruin this, too? Would his family somehow track her down and drag her back into the chaos she had barely escaped? One night, after a particularly vivid nightmare, Claire woke up sobbing. Luke didn't ask questions. He held her, let her break. And when the trembling slowed, he looked at her and said, "No one is going to take this from you. From us, whatever comes, we face it together." It wasn't just comfort, it was truth. Claire felt it in her bones. Near the end of her 3rd trimester, Claire sat by the window watching the snowfall, remembering the woman she used to be, the one who had once sat on a cold bathroom floor, bleeding and alone, listening to her husband plan her funeral. That woman would never have believed in this moment. But this version of her, older, softer, fiercer, did. When the baby came, it was fast and wild and beautiful, a daughter. They named her Grace, not because they were religious, but because nothing else felt truer. Holding Grace against her chest for the first time, Claire realized that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant absorbing the pain into something bigger, something worth living for. She was no longer just a woman who survived. She was a mother, a creator, a protector. The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined her. Her miracle wasn't just the child in her arms, it was who she had become in the process of waiting, breaking, rebuilding, and finally receiving. And that is the mystery of healing. You never know what the end looks like when you begin. You just walk and hope, and when the time is right, life surprises you by blooming where no seed was ever planted. Reflection question: what do you believe is more powerful? A moving on by erasing the past completely. B. Growing stronger by carrying the pain with wisdom. Share your answer or be in the comments. Let's keep the conversation alive. If this story moves something in your heart, please subscribe. Your support fuels more stories like this, stories that remind us, even in the darkest soil, miracles can grow. Closure is rarely clean. It doesn't come wrapped in tidy conversations or dramatic apologies. Most of the time, it arrives when you least expect it, quietly, firmly, and with a strange kind of mercy. For Claire, it came not in a courtroom or a letter, but in the gaze of a man she once called husband. It had been nearly a year since she left everything behind. Her name, her past, her marriage. Vermont had become home. Luke, her steady soul, was the man who knew how to hold her without trying to fix her. And Grace, their daughter, was already babbling, her fingers wrapping around Claire's with a grip more grounding than any therapy session. Claire had not thought much about Andrew lately. Not because the trauma disappeared, but because her new life had grown too full to make space for ghosts. Still, the past has a way of circling back, not to haunt, but to be reckoned with, to be named and, finally, released. The letter came on a Friday afternoon, slipped into the mailbox like any other piece of paper, no return address. Just her name, Claire Whitmore, her new name handwritten in the same sharp, arrogant slant she once loved. She stood still for a long time on the porch, holding it like it was ticking. When she opened it, the words were brief. "I'm in town. I know you had the baby. I want to see you once." No drama, just a goodbye. I owe you that. No threats, no guilt, just one final knot left to untie. Claire didn't tell Luke right away, not out of secrecy, but reverence. She needed to walk this last stretch alone, to look her past in the face without leaning on someone else's strength. She replied the next morning, one sentence: tomorrow. 10 a.m. Old Chapel Cafe. It was strange to walk into that little cafe with no fear in her chest. Not confidence, just clarity. Claire had been someone else the last time she saw Andrew. Someone who tiptoed around his moods, who mistook cruelty for complexity. Now, she walked like a woman who had survived fire and come out with a crown of ash turned gold. He was already there, same pressed shirt, same watch she bought him for their second anniversary. But something had shifted. His face looked older, not from time, but from the weight of consequence. Regret wore him down. She sat without speaking. He cleared his throat. "You look different." "I am," she replied. He nodded. For a moment, they just stared at each other, two people who had once been everything, now strangers connected only by the memory of war. "I came because I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, "not to win you back. Not to explain, just to say it." Claire didn't flinch. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, in anger, in grief, in imagined showdowns. But now, sitting across from him, she felt none of that. "Just peace. I don't need your apology," she said, gently. "I'm not here to make you suffer. I just needed to look at you and know that you no longer have power over me." He swallowed hard. "I lost everything." She tilted her head. "No, Andrew, you threw it away." He looked away, jaw tight. "Do you hate me?" Claire considered the question. "I did, for a long time. But hate is just love that hasn't found its way to peace yet. And I've made peace." He looked down. "Is she your daughter?" "Mine." The old Claire would have frozen, stuttered, tried to spare his ego. But this Claire. She looked him dead in the eye and said, "No, she's Luke's in every way that matters." He nodded slowly, as if that truth burned, but also relieved him of something. "I just wanted to know," he whispered. "To picture her?" Claire leaned forward. "Then picture this. She has a father who reads her stories every night, who built her crib with his bare hands, who sings off-key lullabies and cries when she laughs." Andrew blinked rapidly, eyes wet. "She never know you," Claire added, "and that's a blessing." He didn't argue. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he finally understood the magnitude of what he'd done, not just to her, but to the version of himself that might have been decent, had he chosen better. They sat in silence again. This time, it was final. When she stood up, "He did too." "Thank you," he said. Claire paused. "Goodbye, Andrew," and just like that, she walked out not just of the cafe, but of a chapter that had once defined her. The air outside was crisp. The light had shifted. Something inside her had uncoiled, something that had been holding its breath for too long. She went home, back to the small farmhouse where laughter echoed in the kitchen, where Luke had Grace in a carrier while he chopped vegetables like a man on a mission. He looked up when she walked in, and with one glance, he knew. "It's over," she said. He nodded and opened his arms. She stepped into them, and for the first time in years, she felt entirely free. Closure doesn't come from the people who hurt you. It comes from the person you become in spite of them. And Claire had become someone extraordinary not because she avoided pain, but because she honored it, learned from it, and chose love anyway. If you've ever had to walk away from someone who once held your whole world, tell me this. A. Would you meet them again for one final goodbye? B. Or would you let silence be your last word? Leave your answer or be in the comments below. And if Claire's story has stirred something in you, subscribe. More stories of resilience, love, and healing are on their way. In the quiet aftermath of storms, emotional, relational, or otherwise, what remains is not always destruction. Sometimes, what's left is clarity, a raw, unfiltered truth about who we are, what we've endured, and what we now stand for. Claire's journey wasn't just about surviving betrayal or starting over. It was about reclaiming dignity in the face of devastation and rewriting the script of her own life. Too often, we wait for apologies to move on. We believe closure must come from the person who broke us, or from a perfect conversation that neatly ties up the past. But the truth is, closure is a choice. It's the quiet decision to no longer bleed from wounds someone else stopped tending to. It's realizing that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means remembering without letting it control you. Claire didn't get justice in the form many would expect. There was no public vindication, no courtroom victory. What she got was greater. She rose. Not because her pain disappeared, but because she learned to carry it with wisdom. She built a new life, not by erasing her past, but by choosing love where there was once loss, by becoming a mother who gives what she never received, and by choosing a partner who meets her with open hands, not clenched fists. And isn't that what we all long for at our core? To be seen, valued, loved, not in the absence of scars, but in the presence of them. Not because we are perfect, but because someone sees our imperfection and still stays. Claire found that. Not through rushing into something new, but through deep inner work, acceptance, and time. In many ways, Claire's story is a mirror. Perhaps you see your own reflection faint, familiar in her silence, her pain, her resolve. Maybe you too have held on to someone long after they stopped holding on to you. Maybe you've been waiting for a sorry that may never come. Or maybe you're afraid that letting go means admitting defeat. But it doesn't. Letting go is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the ability to say, I deserve better, and I can build it. The lesson here is powerful and deeply universal. You do not need the person who broke you to come back and fix you. You need yourself. You need your courage. You need your truth. That is what Claire found. That is what you can find too. So how can you apply this to your life right now? Stop chasing apologies that only reopen old wounds. If someone truly cares, their actions will show it. If not, your peace is more important than their remorse. Create space for something new emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Don't let bitterness rent a permanent room in your heart. Redefine love not as rescue, but as responsibility. Who you choose to love, whether it's yourself, a child, or a new partner, should nourish you, not drain you. Find strength in your story. The pain may be part of your past, but the resilience is what will shape your future. You have the right to a full, rich life even if someone else tried to write you out of your own story. Now I'd love to hear from you. If you were in Claire's shoes, what do you think is harder? A letting go of someone who once meant everything. B. Opening your heart again after betrayal. Let me know your answer in the comments below, or B, and feel free to share your personal insights so others can learn from your experience too. And if this story touched your heart or gave you strength, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss more stories that uplift, heal, and connect us. If you'd like to support this channel financially, even a small donation would mean the world. I'm not young anymore, but I still believe in using the years I have left to create something meaningful for society. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for being here, thank you for listening. And above all, thank you for choosing healing over hate.